Hello and welcome to the bike show. A very busy bike show, as you can see. This fella, as always, tapping away, filling up the website with good stuff. As is Harry at the moment, because he's just come back from the South African launch of a bike that I think is going to prove to be very important indeed.
There are important bikes and there are important bikes. In the world of the adventure bike, it's always the biggest and the best that get all the headlines. But recently, there's been a bit of a seismic shift. Sure, the big bikes will always get the big headlines, but there is a sense that they're getting a bit too big, a bit too complicated. To counter this, there's a new breed of adventure bike appearing, bikes which are smaller, lighter, less complicated, and easier for mere mortals like you and I to handle off-road. On the bike show, we've already tried out the Honda CRF 250 Rally and the Kawasaki Versys 300X. First intimations that a revolution was coming, and they were a step in the right direction. But here is the bike that we've all been waiting for, BMW's new 310 GS. Cynics will say that this is just a styling exercise on the G310R platform, that it can't possibly have any ability off-road. Its maker seems to think the same way. The BMW are being surprisingly reluctant to call this a full adventure bike. They're really touting it as sort of, I don't know, an urban jungle bike which has the capability to do a bit of off-road if you really feel like it. And you can understand why, because if you look at the market for which this bike is really intended, and that's the Indian market, the Asian markets, they don't want adventure bikes. They want something which is A, aspirational, and the BMW brand gives you that, but B, they can actually handle the poor quality of the roads in countries like that. Having said that, I completely disagree with BMW, and I think, and wait for it, that this is possibly one of the nicest, the best adventure bikes I've ever ridden. It is light, it's easy to ride, it's simple, there's not too much power. And, okay, the suspension might not be the most top-notch suspension that you can think of, but it handles the bumps pretty well. Now, okay, we've just done this dirt road, we haven't done anything really hectically, seriously, properly, dangerously off-road, but I reckon it could handle. There's enough power in the engine to pull you through anything, and it's comfortable, it's manoeuvrable. You never feel like the bike's taking control of you. You always feel like you are in control. The quality is fantastic, and I really, really can't understand why BMW are not going to push this harder as a proper adventure bike. Because if you think about it, adventure bikes are getting too big, too heavy, too complex, and dare I say it, too powerful. 160 brake horsepower off-road? Really? How many people are being put off adventure riding because of all these factors? This little jewel addresses all those issues and opens up adventure riding to a massive new audience. Nothing seems intimidating or impossible when you're in the saddle. It's like the whole adventure riding thing has been turned down a few notches to allow those of us with limited skill to join in the fun. And certain factors that came in for mild criticism on the G310R start to make a bit more sense. All of us commented that perhaps the brakes weren't really quite as good, as sharp, as powerful as they could be. And BMW countered this with a very interesting comment saying, in the markets again that it's designed for, the Indian and Asian markets, they're not used to super powerful, you know, monoblock Brembo type braking power. So really, they had to tone it down a bit for those markets. So they weren't too sharp, they weren't too powerful. Now, a happy side effect of this you find when you're off-road the brakes aren't sharp, they aren't grabby. You can actually put quite a bit of pressure on the lever, and you've got quite a lot more modulation on the lever without it being too abrupt and too sharp.
What I'm trying to say in a very roundabout way is that these are fantastic brakes for this kind of riding.
Of course there is ABS fitted, but down here is a little button and you can turn it off.
In the past, I've taken part in BMW's adventure weekends, always on 1200 GSs, and while I've enjoyed the challenge of getting through the day in one piece on these massive bikes, I can't help feeling that I would have enjoyed them even more on something like this. I would have looked at nothing the course could throw at me with a will it bite feeling in my bones, and if I did happen to drop the bike, I could simply pick it up and carry on. I just know that some people will ask, where's the traction control, pro riding modes, electronic suspension, off-road ABS, all those essential electronics.
And isn't there a case for saying, if a bike needs all these fancy electronics to keep it on the straight and narrow, then it's getting too much? Isn't that the point? So rather make something simpler, which doesn't need all the ridiculous electronics, even though they have transformed motorcycling, but it doesn't need them necessarily to make the ride enjoyable, safe, and make you feel like you can actually do this. But maybe we should acquiesce to BMW's viewpoint on the bike and say, okay, so maybe it's not a proper adventure bike. Well, in that case, it has to perform well on tar. So that's where we're going next.
I've always loved adventure bikes on the blacktop. They frequently give me more riding pleasure than sports bikes. I enjoy the riding position and the leverage that wider bars give me, not to mention the comfort. And it's on tar that all that power can be used more effectively than off-road. So how can a paltry 34 brake horsepower make me smile?
One thing stands out really clearly from when Matt was in LA at the launch of the 310R, the road version. He came down this twisty mountain pass, and when he pulled up, he had a grin as big as the Cheshire Cat. It was from ear to ear. And his impression was that this bike was so much more fun than it had any right to be, with a 300cc, 30-odd horsepower engine in it. But he's right. This is fantastic fun on the tar. It's not the fastest, fine, and if you get any kind of an uphill, then yes, it does struggle a little bit. But it just handles so sure-footedly. It just eases through the turns. It's lovely, it's light, it's chuckable. And even those dual-purpose tyres grip perfectly well.
There is something intoxicating about using all the available performance of a bike rather than dipping only 40 or 50% into it. You're wringing every last ounce of speed out of it, riding it to its limit. On a sweeping mountain pass such as this, I'm not sure I would have any more fun on a bike with twice the power, let alone 5 or 6 times more. Keep the motor singing high up in the rev range, stir the gearbox and revel in the beautifully chuckable and secure handling. Even the long travel suspension doesn't feel wallowy or too soft. What a fantastic machine to simply get on and ride. You can probably tell that I'm rather impressed with this G310 GS, and I make no apologies about it. It really is that good.
When we sent him down on this launch, I have to say, you know, tiny little capacity, a little bit of a pretend adventure. You weren't that keen, were you? But you've come back with the cheesy grin of epic proportions.
I wasn't keen, I was curious, but I have to say that this is a game-changing bike.
Wow.
This is one of the most enjoyable bikes or new bikes that I've ridden probably ever, because it was just so much better than I thought it was going to be.
Look, you had a primarily road kind of launch, but you managed gravel, obviously. We've seen plenty of that.
Yeah,
bits of
yeah, yeah.
off-road.
No, we went up the Montague Pass.
But did you ever feel out of depth then? I mean,
Not at all. Not at all. This is why it was so revelatory. It was. I mean, I love my adventure riding, and I've handled the big GSs and the big KTMs, and I like it. But this just, you felt in control of the bike for once. Not that the bike was kind of leading you. And I think a telling thing is it doesn't have all these insane electronics to help contain the weight and the power that all the big bikes need.
Yes.
It has an ABS switch which you can turn off, and that's it.
Okay, back to the spec box. The rating. Let's hear it.
Well,
out of 10.
It is something out of 10, and I know people are going to start saying, oh, well, they're only saying this because BMW are paying lots of money. It's 10 out of 10.
Ooh,
it's a genuine
really?
10 out of 10. It is that good for what it does.
Okay, well, then that must mean that the value is good. What are we looking at? Bearing in mind the 310R, the Naked Street one, was 69 grand, is it?
The 69, 650. This is 79, 650.
10 grand more. Is it worth 10 grand more?
If you're just going to ride it on the road, no. But if you're going to take the time to take it off-road and do some stuff, definitely.
So if you only had 80 grand to spend and you want to go adventure riding, is this the bike for them?
Yes. And just think about this. Think of the market it's going to open up. A lot of lady riders, a lot of smaller male riders who these enormous GSs and
Gestured towards me there.
Yeah, I know.
they're just too intimidating. And this is something that everyone can get on. And I'm 6 foot something, and it still didn't feel like a tiny bike. It felt like a
I'm with
proper-sized
you,
bike.
Harry. I think this is going to be an absolute game changer. And to emphasise that, I mean, you just need to take a look at the competition, which at the moment is something like, you know, dull but worthy Kawasaki versus definitely not very good off-road. You've got that
The Honda CRF 250
rally,
rally,
the 250 rally, which is a little bit overpriced and just for off-road.
Just for off-road. I mean, the road. That's the thing. The road behaviour of this GS.
Excellent.
It's brilliant. On the twisty stuff, it was fantastic.
V-Strom 250 is due to arrive in this
It's
country
coming.
soon, but that'll be even more of a soft road.
The interesting thing about the competition for this, it's not what's here now.
It's what's coming.
It's what's coming, because KTM cannot look at this and not put their 390 motor in an adventure chassis.
Well,
they
I'm trying to
can't. They
imagine
cannot
that.
ignore this.
Can we go to Brighton Orange and it's better?
The whole reason for being is to take the fight to BMW. They cannot ignore this, so that's going to be coming out, I'm sure.
I tell you what, BMW are on a roll, aren't they? They just keep debuting new model after new model, and it's not just the existing stuff. You know, this HP4 race we tested last year with new technology. This 310 is amazing, a new direction for motorcycling. You've got to praise them. So what I'm intrigued is you managed to have a word with BMW's top dude in South Africa. After the break, we're going to find out if Harry discovered what else is coming down the pipeline.